Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run and carry tidings to the king that the Lord has delivered him from the power of his enemies." Joab said to him, "You are not to carry tidings today. You may carry tidings another day, but today you shall not do so, because the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go, tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed before Joab and ran. Then Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said to Joab, "Come what may, let me also run after the Cushite." And Joab said, "Why will you run, my son, seeing that you have no reward for the tidings?" "Come what may," he said, "I will run." So he said to him, "Run." Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. When Pierre de Coubertin organized the first modern Olympic Games in 1896, 14 nations participated together in 43 sporting events. A rather humble beginning when you think of what the Olympics have become today. But one of those events was the marathon, a grueling 40-kilometer cross-country race. It has since been expanded to over 42 kilometers. It was the final and climactic event of the Games. It still usually is, and has remained a consistent crowd pleaser over the years. So strong is the association between the marathon and the Olympic Games that you might be excused for thinking that the marathon was also an important event in the ancient Olympics. But you would be mistaken. The ancient Greeks, though they loved foot races, never held such an event. The marathon was invented by the creators of the modern Olympics in commemoration of something that did happen in ancient Greece, however, in memory of one of the most important military victories in the ancient world. The battle was fought on the coastal plain of Marathon, about 40 kilometers from Athens. The Athenians, you see, had offended the Persian Empire, which had the most powerful military force on the face of the earth. So, the Persian king had sent his navy to punish Athens and its allies. But the allies could not come, and so Athens stood against the invaders, almost alone. I don't imagine anyone, not even the Athenians themselves, thought that they could possibly beat the Persians, the uncontested masters of the world, with the largest army ever seen. Everyone expected that Athens would quickly fall, and that the other city-states of the Greek peninsula would soon follow. But something amazing happened. The underdogs actually won. The invincible Persians were defeated. And legend states that, when the dust finally cleared from the battlefield, the Athenian soldiers looked at one another, scarcely believing that they were still alive, much less that they had held the field. And they wondered who would take the news of this unexpected victory back to Athens. And one man stepped forward, Phidippides. He had fought all day and was just as exhausted as anybody else. But he volunteered to take the message to the Athenian assembly in the heart of the city, 40 kilometers away. And so Pheidippides set out. You could hardly blame him if he had taken it easy on his run. But Pheidippides did not slacken his pace one bit. You wouldn't blame him for turning aside to drink from a stream or catch his breath. But Pheidippides did not stop once. He ran straight to the heart of the assembly and cried out one word, "Nikomen!" We have won. And he fell down dead. Pheidippides did all of that, risked, and ultimately gave his life merely for the honor of being the bearer of the message of victory. It is an amazing story, but it is not a Bible story. It is a story of ancient Greece. So why am I telling it to you? Well, it is an Olympic summer as I record this episode. The 23rd Modern Olympics are about to be held in Paris. And I wanted to tell some Bible stories that tied in with the Summer Games. And the story of the marathon is actually eerily similar to a pretty amazing Bible story. This is Retelling the Bible. Episode 8.16, Olympics Marathon. Civil wars and wars of succession are the worst. They tend to pit kin against kin and friend against friend. They are bloody and destructive. And the kingdom of Israel had just survived such a war. Absalom, or Abshalom in Hebrew, whose name ironically meant Father of Peace, had unleashed some of the worst violence that anyone had seen in a generation. He had rebelled against his father, the king, and had actually shown how fragile King David's hold was on power. Absalom's revolt had proven to be wildly popular. People from all over the nation, and especially from the tribes other than Judah, had flocked to his banner. He was able to field an army much bigger than the one his father could command. Everyone who looked at the situation had predicted a dismal outcome for the king. At best, perhaps, he would be able to escape and live in exile. But Joab, David's commander, had gathered the troops that they had left. Perhaps they were fewer in number, but they were battle-hardened veterans. And Joab had managed to maneuver the two forces into a direct confrontation in this forest. Here, their experience and Joab's tactical brilliance had been enough to win the day. Absalom's army had broken and fled. The young man himself was now dead, hanging from a nearby tree, with 3 javelins piercing his heart. Joab himself had put them there. So against all hope and expectation, there was a victory. The nation had been saved. Only one thing remained, and that was to share this extraordinary news with the king, whom Joab had persuaded to wait behind the lines in safety. To be the bearer of such tidings was indeed an honor. Everyone would remember who was the first to tell them the unexpectedly good news. All of the honor and glory of the victory would rub off onto the messenger. He would likely not need to pay for a beer for months to come, as everyone wanted him to sit with them and hear him tell his story of the battle. What's more, while a king could often be tempted to take his disappointment for bad news out on the messenger, a positive message could be rewarded handsomely. And so, it is hardly surprising that even before Absalom's body was cold, Ahimaaz rushed forward, breathless and eager, saying, "Hey man, let me run and carry tidings to the king that Yahweh has delivered him from the power of his enemies." Ahimaaz was not just anybody. He was the son of Zadok, and Zadok, as the high priest of El Elyon in Jerusalem, was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom after the king. Indeed, he was said to have been descended from the ancient Jebusite kings of Jerusalem. Ahimaaz's birth certainly made him someone who was well worthy of the honor of carrying such good news. But there was one hitch. The news was good, as far as the kingdom and its future were concerned, but Joab knew that the king himself would not be quite so sure. In fact, before the king sent his troops out, and despite the fact that he knew that his own life depended on their success, he had made Joab and the other commanders promise to go easy on his son. Joab had made that promise, but he had always known that if he got the opportunity, it was a promise that he would not keep. David likely knew it deep down as well, but that would not prevent him from reacting emotionally to the news of what had transpired here. Ahimaaz should have realized all of that. He was the son of a priest, after all. He had been given a better education than most any other man in the kingdom. But despite all of the advantages he'd been given, he'd never seemed to appreciate them. He never paid attention in class. Whenever their teacher was droning on and on about the particular methods of selecting, slaughtering, and butchering all the right sorts of clean animals, Ahimaaz would be staring out the window, thinking about Running. Oh, to be out there, on the track, lining up with the fiercest competitors in the land, and then stepping into those starting blocks. The tension rising while he waits for the sound of the starters' bow twang. He loved to hear the sound of the crowd, and he longed for the day when they would shout out his name. Ahimaaz! 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 His one wish was to become the most famous runner in all the land. That was why he had developed his own personal running style. He ran in this strange manner, where he would fling his leg out like this and wind his arms around like that. It looked odd, and it frankly did not seem to do anything to improve his speed. What it did do, however, was make it so that anyone who saw him running, even from a distance, would recognize that it was him right away. "I think that one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok," they would say. So it was really no surprise that Ahimaaz wanted to run on this occasion, that everyone would long remember. As Joab watched the lad, who was now busy stretching and lacing up his Nike brand sandals, he realized that he was only thinking about the run and not what might meet him at the end of it. It seemed that he might not be as bright as his status suggested. Funny how that often happens. Joab had not been able to save one noble young man today, but he was damned if he was going to let this one run towards his own doom. "You are not to carry tidings today," Joab said as simply as he could. "You may carry tidings another day, but today you shall not do so, because the king's son is dead." "Yeah, man, I know he's dead," Ahimaaz enthused. "That means we won. Isn't that awesome? Can you imagine David's face when I tell him?" "What? No, don't you get it?" Joab sputtered in frustration. It was at this point that another man, a Cushite, walked by. "You there," Joab snapped. "What's your name?" The man opened his mouth to reply, but Joab interrupted him. "Never mind. I just remembered that I don't care." He looked him up and down. He had long legs, a lean and muscled physique, and dark skin. Even more important in the moment, he had the look of someone who didn't matter. He was a mercenary, one of a number of swords for hire who had been brought into this desperate battle. If, when he delivered his message, the king just happened to run him through in a moment of passion, there would be no family to explain it all to. Even more importantly, there would be one less mercenary to pay off. Yes, this man was perfect. So Joab said to the Cushite, "Go, tell the king what you have seen." The man bowed down low, and with barely a moment's hesitation, he was off like a shot, running at full speed through the hills straight towards Mahanaim, where the king waited to hear of his fate. Ahimaaz stood there, his mouth agape. He couldn't believe what had just happened. As the other runner crested over the top of the first hill, he tried one more time. "Come on, man," he said. "I told you that I could do it. In fact, I still will. Come what may, let me also run after the Cushite." Joab looked at him with pity. Some people just didn't get it. He was trying to save this foolish son of a priest here. "Why will you run, my son?" he said, not without some tenderness. Ahimaaz did kind of remind him of himself at that age. "You have no reward for the tidings, so what is the point?" "I don't care," Ahimaaz insisted. "I will run. This is a race now, and I can win it." Joab threw up his hands. "Okay, whatever. Run." Ahimaaz was off like a shot, running with his strange, ungainly gait. It is a beautiful morning as we wait for the end of today's event. The dramatic conclusion of the 42-kilometer race that is being held between Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, and a new strong competitor, a man from Cush. King David is down there at the finish line between the two gates of the city, waiting to greet the victor. And I have come up here to the roof of the gate to call out the final stages of what is being called the greatest race of the 10th century BCE, whatever that means. And you can hear by the excitement in the crowd that a runner has finally appeared on the horizon. Now, it is strange because he does not seem to be appearing on the direct route from the place where the battle was supposed to be fought. That leads me to think that this runner has made a choice. He seems to have chosen to take a bit of a longer route, avoiding the steep inclines of the hill country to stay on the flat plain. It is a bit of a risky choice, but I've got to say that it seems to have paid off for him today. Well, I'd better call this news down to the finish line. "My lord the king, there is a runner. He is running alone." The king is clearly excited now. He knows that a single runner will certainly be bearing news. But wait, what do I see? There is another runner! Another runner has appeared from over the hill that leads directly to the place where the battle was fought. People of Israel, this is exciting! It looks like this race is not over yet, and the final moments will be dramatic. "My lord the king, there is another runner!" Now, let's see if we can identify these athletes by sight. I'm looking, my friends, at the first runner, the one who came from the plain. Look at his style, his gait, the way he flings his limbs in every direction. That looks... Oh, that can only be one man. My lord, I think the first one runs like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok. David was pacing nervously between the gates. He knew that not only his kingdom, but probably his own life was on the line. He had been so fraught all day long that it seemed as if everything that happened was an omen of doom. But when the sentinel shouted down that the first runner was Ahimaaz, he grasped at what seemed to be a single straw of hope. "Ahimaaz," the king said to those standing nearby. "He is a noble. Surely Joab would not send someone from such a good family with bad news. He will have remembered the incidents where I may have overreacted to bad news a little bit and kind of stabbed someone of little worth. No, if it's Ahimaaz, he surely comes with good tidings." And with that, the son of Zadok arrived. He called out what everyone wanted to hear. "Shalom!" he cried. It was one word, but it spoke volumes. It meant peace, of course, but also so much more than what we mean when we say peace. It wasn't just that the war was over, but also that it had ended with wholeness and everything unrolling as it needed to. It was one powerful word, and it promised much. But Ahimaaz was not finished. He threw himself to the ground before his master. "Blessed be Yahweh your God," he declared, "who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord, the king." The king smiled at this news, but not broadly. There was something else he needed to know that mattered even more to him. He hesitantly ventured a two-word question. "Shalom lu Absalom?" For it mattered little to David if his kingdom was well and at peace, if he could not say the same for his son, who was supposed to be the father of peace. And it was at that moment, as Ahimaaz saw all of the fear and anxiety on the king's face, that it finally dawned on him that it might not be such a good idea to be the one to bear today's news. The words of Joab still rang in his ears. The king's son is dead. But he suddenly found himself unable to speak them out loud. And so, instead, he stammered out, I saw a great tumult when the king's servant Joab sent your servant, but I don't really know what it was about." "Well, you're not much good, are you?" interrupted the king. "Just stand over there. The other messenger is coming. Maybe he can answer my question." Everyone turned expectantly as the Cushite came puffing down the slope towards the two gates. He called out his message of good news and victory, but Of course, Ahimaaz had already stolen his thunder on that issue. The king brushed off his praise and asked him the same question that was still on his heart. Shalom lu Abshalom? The Cushite obviously had no understanding of the sensibilities of this particular political moment. As a foreigner, he may have also missed the sense of longing that was present in David's question. That was why he, unlike Ahimaaz, neither hesitated nor prevaricated. May the enemies of my lord the king, and all who raise up to do you harm, be like that young man, he boldly declared. With that, David dissolved into tears. "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom!" he cried as he was led away to a private room. "Would that I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." I have always been fascinated by the strange similarities between the story of Pheidippides of Athens and Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. Both managed to turn the mundane task of delivering a message into an extraordinary athletic feat. Both made a very memorable one-word announcement. Perhaps most importantly, though, both stories seem to be about equally legendary. Though Pheidippides seems to have been a real person, the story of his famous run from Marathon was only first told by Lucian of Samosata almost 3 centuries after the Battle of Marathon. There is similarly very little that is on solid historical ground about David's reign. We have extra-biblical evidence that his dynasty did exist in later times, so the man David probably existed, but the archaeological record does not confirm very much at all of what the Bible says about his kingdom. So, did Ahimaaz, with his crazy way of running that people could recognize from a distance, exist? I'd sure like to think so, but I can't prove it to you. But whether or not it all happened exactly as we are told, there is something amazing about a good story. The story of Pheidippides inspired not only Pierre de Coubertin, but continues to inspire over 1 million people who run marathons every year. As far as I know, Ahimaaz's run never inspired anyone to create any particular race, but perhaps it will inspire you, dear listener, to do something amazing. That is it for this episode of Retelling the Bible. Please subscribe so you can get the next regular episode in 2 weeks' time. And please rate and review wherever you download your podcasts. The theme music for the podcast is Ada. The mood music for this episode was Rhino's theme, and the running music was Hot Pursuit. The music is by Kevin MacLeod, is licensed in the Creative Commons, and can be found at incompetech.com. You can contact me on twitter.com at Retelling Bible and on the Facebook page, Retelling the Bible. Show notes for this episode have been posted at retellingthebible.wordpress.com. And yes, for those Hebrew scholars who are wondering, in those show notes, I will explain to you why I didn't quite transcribe David's question as it appears in the original Hebrew. Thanks once again to my awesome Patreon supporters whose support means so much to me. Go to patreon.com/retellingthebible to support this podcast. This is Retelling the Bible, and I have been your storyteller, W. Scott McCandless.